We all have to change jobs or transition a project. But what happens when you've got everything stuck in your head and you're out of time? I'm Liz Moyer, Doctor of Strategic Leadership and a certified coach. I've served as an Air Force officer in the Pentagon, deployed around the world, and worked in both joint and special operation units. I know what it feels like to be overwhelmed, and I'm here to help. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a 3-step process to be able to get everything that is in your head on paper and helping that next person. Make sure you stay till the end because I'm going to leave you with 3 powerful tools you can leave for the individual that is going to take over your role responsibility. This is a 3-step brain dump framework. And I spent 3 or 4 years studying hundreds of models, really working on my doctorate research to think about how can we as a leader improve our performance and address the overwhelm that is just in our life. And what's crazy is that sometimes it's a very simple process. I'll briefly go over it and then we'll do a demo. Step 1 is always to get all that information that's on your head out. Think about it. It's like a desktop where there's 1,000 things on it. And we really can't understand the information. We can't sort it. We can't describe it. Now, you don't have to start with what I have for the recommendations, but you want to make sure you include that information. And if you're not sure where to start, then go ahead and fill in the information that relates to these categories. The next step is to structure this into some type of standard operating procedure, a document that someone can reference and then be able to look at later. There are amazing examples out there. And what you'll see in the pinned comment is contact information if you'd like to see some of those examples. But if there's something that you already like, don't recreate the wheel and just replicate that. I'm a huge fan of putting some of that content into buckets and big areas like what are the routines? What are some of the contacts? What are some of the big projects that are going on? If you're turning over an entire job, but you don't have to get stuck on that nitty gritty. You want to make sure that you've covered some of those big rocks. And then finally, what you want to do is use that AI assistant, use the large language model. And we'll go over this. I do want to give you an example of how to use this in Gemini, but this works in Claude, this works in ChatGPT, or if you were in the government, this works on Nipper GPT, Camel GPT, Ask Sage, all of those different large language models, even the ones that are closed, that Palantir, and I want to say it's Scale AI offer. Okay. I have done a previous video and I have it linked up above for you to be able to see different ways that you can capture information. There are a ton out there. One of the commercial ones is called Otter AI. There's a free version along with a paid for one. And then if you have Microsoft products, Teams, you can put on a meeting and then press record. And it will not only record, but it will transcribe. So here's an example of a transcript. And what I did was I wanted to take a specific project, which was a visit to the Air Force Personnel Center. And I just started talking about it. And if you look through it, I'm talking to it just like a friend would. You know, when you are doing turnover, when you have the ability to go over something with an individual that you are going to hand over to, you're able to explain stuff, you're able to go out on tangents. Well, this sort of replicates that a little bit. And sometimes, often actually, it can be faster for us to speak it than it is to type it or to write it. Now, if you are someone that says, no, 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 I absolutely need to write first, please do that. Write it out or type it. But I still want you to think about if you write it out, you are missing context. So maybe start with writing it and take a picture of that and capture it, and then expand about that and talk through it a little bit more and really try to capture those things that are very nuanced that you can't look up in a regulation or that are very specific to the organization that you're working with. That could be something as simple as don't reply all, the boss will get really mad, but that's something that maybe you can help that person with. So in this case, what I did is I took all the information that I had to do with, I had a role as an Air Force Element Section Commander. One of the projects in there would be visiting Air Force personnel. It comes up with the entire transcript. I can do a couple of different things depending on the version of what I have, but ultimately you press export, you continue on, and then it generates information that I can then pull up. I will copy paste it over into that large language model. So right here I am over in Gemini. You can see back in my notes, and I'll bring them up again in a moment. I really do enjoy Gemini. It has a great ability to process a lot of data. And so when you think about transcripts, they can sometimes be very, very long, i.e., data. It also does a very good job with Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets, much better I've seen just in comparison with a model. So I will check a couple of things before I put the content in. Number one, your left-hand corner, you want to look. This is the free version of Gemini. You can see it's asking me to upgrade. So this is limited use, will kind of hit your limit very quickly when you don't pay for it. But it has the Flash and then the Pro, and that's similar with Claude. You've got Opus, which is more focused on reasoning, and then Sonnet, which is quick. I was helping my husband the other day, and he was getting frustrated with Claude, and I realized that he had his default, which I think is just the default for Claude, on Sonnet, and I was like, oh, okay. Step one, make sure you're in Pro. Then go ahead, Control V, and then I'm going to put that transcript that I just was showing you over there. The other thing is I'm then going to upload a file, and I'll give it an example of a standard operating procedure that I liked. And here is a previous Air Force element, section commander SOP, and I'm going to press open so that way it will attach that as well. So I'm giving it more data. And so you think about this formula of, all right, I've given it the data, which is the transcript, my brain dump. I've given it that SOP framework that I think is helpful. And then I'm going to give it a prompt and say, and once again, I can speak into this, I can write into it, I can do some prompt engineering, really make sure it's good. I'll be a little bit lazy today, but I'll say, here is my draft SOP for the role I am turning over. I want to add in the AFPC visit as a major project and make sure it includes painstakingly uh, in-depth info so that the person doesn't feel lost when they are trying to do this visit. Of course, I could give it a lot more context. We always have to think about prompting. This assistant is like an intern, and the more information you give them, the more context, the better. Okay. So I will press submit, and it will think. If you want to, of course, you can see what it's thinking. So you can click show thinking, and it will go through all of that. And pretty helpful, actually. We will let that work for a moment and come back. One side comment: if you find this helpful, please subscribe and share with someone else. We are always overwhelmed as leaders. There's just too many tasks to do in a day. And what I want to be able to do is build a community where we can share tips and tricks and talk to experts that help us with addressing that overwhelm. So Gemini took a couple of seconds, went through it, and it just created a new section and did the exact format that I wanted to, where it put it in the numerical order. It came up with the information and talked about some of the details that I have in there. And this is just really taking my transcript and saying, this is what we think is most important. Now, is this perfect? No, maybe there's something that isn't fully captured, or it misunderstood what I was saying, especially in the military, but whatever organization corporately, we all use acronyms. We all kind of have that insider knowledge, and that can really cause confusion. It's trying to figure out what to do. And if you want to take this to the next level, When you've created these standard operating procedures, if your organization already has the use of some large language model, you can take that SOP, you can ask it questions, you can really create an assistant or even an agent if you want to, where it's taken all this information. You can create annexes from this. And so when you are new into the role or your replacement's new into the role, they can say, okay, how often was that trip to the Air Force Personnel Center? So that's a pretty cool next step that you can do. And just one thing just to show you, this SOPs don't have to be fancy. This is the one that I uploaded into it, and I came up with purpose, applicability, general responsibilities and guidance, and then came up with sections and went from there. You can see the formatting isn't exactly perfect, but I can put that back into the large language model, tell it what formatting I want, and go from there. Remember, you are short on time, you're overwhelmed, you're trying to do continuity, you're trying to do turnover, but you're also trying to get your job done. A lot of times this requires a move or just stressors that are going on in your family. And what you want to do is think about, okay, the information that I'm giving, how can I add the most value? I do want to warn you that continuity often fails. I mentioned a little bit earlier, we tend to just get busy and we think we'll have time and then we won't. Um, Another thing is that we really sometimes will focus on the wrong type of stuff to capture. And that's why, going back just a slide, this concept of what are the must knows for day one? What are the key players and contacts? As you progress as a leader, it's not necessarily what you know, but who you know. And so if I can give a really comprehensive Rolodex to the person that is coming up behind me, then when they get stuck, they have a point of contact instead of just starting from ground zero. The gotchas are what I talked about with some of those unsaid cultural norms that exist in your organization. And then what's coming up in the next 30 to 90 days is so critical. It's really frustrating when you come into a project and there's a deadline that's due 2 weeks afterwards. And now your boss is saying, well, wasn't that in your turnover or continuity? How come you didn't know that? Or maybe that person's trying to schedule some time off and they don't realize that it's going to conflict with that. So, those are really great memory joggers that can help you to prevent that. You also have to remember that we have blind spots. We might think this is the most important thing this person needs to know, or you have certain experiences and you assume that person knows it and they don't. And so, taking that extra time to assume that the individual is sort of tabula rasa, doesn't have that information. I'd rather than have the context than not have it. And you can do it very quickly. A lot of my turnover, I produced over 100 pages of continuity before I left my job, was when I was on my lunch break, just taking a walk and speaking into it and saying, here's my thoughts on it. Here's the memory joggers. And then I would go back to work, look at more information, and then fill in the gaps, work back and forth with a large language model, and continue to iterate on that until I felt, okay, this is some good information. All right, finally, the bonus element. So, the three non negotiables that I recommend you leave behind for that individual that's coming in. And this is totally stolen from an Army officer. The first one is to leave a letter of encouragement and support. Nothing better than just saying, hey, you've got this, and just good luck. The second one is a letter of guidance and advice. And we have to remember that that's exactly what it is. They don't have to take it. Uh, but it's almost some of those kind of warning, watch out things. I know there's two schools of thoughts. It's sometimes, let's say you've had a conflict with an individual and you don't want to mention that to the person that replaces you because you want to give them a fresh start. Totally agree with that. There are also things that you can do to mention and say, with this individual, trust and verify, or they do better with additional guidance or stricter timelines. Those are things that potentially someone just needs. It's not good or bad. And You're giving that individual a little bit more context and then they can decide for themselves. The last one is a list of things that they can blame you for. So give them permission to pin you for your mistakes. If you think about it in a course of a year, 365 days, if you make a ton of decisions, may make 100 decisions each day, which is very, I mean, the research shows you make way more than that, those decisions in a day. But if you get 99% of them right, you still made one decision incorrectly each day. Over the course of a year, that's 55 bad decisions or things that you probably would have done a little bit differently. And that adds up. And you have your strengths. You focus on certain things. I love innovation. I love trying new things, but that means there were other parts of the organization I may neglect. So having that humility to say, here's what I messed up is so vital. And overwhelm is going to happen to us as leaders. But I'm really confident if you use this 3-step process, your continuity is going to be better. As always, I really appreciate when you subscribe and share this with others. And I love your comments, which talk about how you are addressing overwhelm as a leader. Until next time.